Princess Arya had never seen anything so ordinary in her entire life. She stood at the massive crystal windows of the royal palace, watching the human visitors climb the golden steps toward the main entrance. Their leader walked with purpose, but everything about him screamed common soldier to her royal eyes. His armor was practical leather, not the shining metal she expected from important people. His hair showed gray streaks, and his face carried lines that spoke of too many battles under the sun. Most shocking of all, he carried his own bags instead of having servants do it for him. "Look at this," Arya whispered to her friends, who quickly gathered around the window. "Mother says these humans are here for important trade talks, but their leader looks like he just walked off a battlefield." Lady Celeste, her closest companion, covered her mouth to hide her giggles. "Are you sure he's really their leader?" "Maybe. He's just carrying bags for the real diplomat." "No, I checked the guest list," Arya replied, waving an elegant hand. "That rough-looking man is actually their commander. Can you believe it? This is what humans consider leadership material." The group of young nobles burst into quiet laughter. They had grown up in the floating crystal city, where everything was beautiful and perfect. Their people lived for hundreds of years, never aging the way humans did. They could create light with their hands and make flowers bloom with a simple touch. To them, humans seemed like children playing at being adults. "I heard humans only live about 80 years, whispered Lord Kieran, joining their conversation. "No wonder they look so desperate all the time. They barely have time to learn anything before they die." "Exactly," Arya nodded, feeling clever and superior. "What could they possibly teach us? We've been alive longer than their entire bloodlines." Down below, the human delegation had reached the main doors. Palace guards in flowing robes opened the crystal gates, and the visitors stepped inside. Arya noticed how the humans looked around in wonder at the floating stairs and walls that changed colors with the light. Their amazement only made her feel more superior. "Come on," she told her friends. "Let's go watch Mother receive these guests. This should be entertaining." The throne room was a masterpiece of crystal and starlight. Queen Lyra sat on her throne, which seemed to be carved from a single massive diamond. Her silver hair flowed like water, and her dress appeared to be made of moonbeams themselves. She was the picture of ethereal perfection, exactly what a royal should look like. The human delegation entered, and Arya had to admit they tried to show proper respect. They bowed low, though not as gracefully as her people would have. Their leader stepped forward, and Arya got her first close look at him. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with kind eyes that seemed to notice everything. His hands were rough from years of sword work, and a thin scar ran along his left cheek. Everything about him was so human, so ordinary, so beneath her royal standards. "Your Majesty," the human commander said, his voice deep and respectful. "I am Commander Drake of the Human Alliance. We come seeking friendship and trade between our peoples." Queen Lyra smiled graciously. "Welcome, Commander Drake. We are honored by your visit. I trust your journey was pleasant, long but worthwhile. Your Majesty, we bring proposals that could benefit both our kingdoms greatly." Arya rolled her eyes. Even his name sounded common. Drake, like a simple water bird. She had expected something more impressive from someone important enough to speak with royalty. As the formal greetings continued, Arya found herself studying the other humans. They were all so different from her people, where her kind was tall and graceful. These humans were shorter and stockier, where her people had smooth, glowing skin. These humans showed every year of their brief lives on their faces. "Mother is being far too polite," Arya whispered to Celeste. "Look how they just stand there like confused children. Do they even understand half of what she's saying?" "Probably not," Celeste whispered back. "I heard humans can't even use magic. How do they accomplish anything?" The welcoming ceremony continued for another hour. Queen Lyra showed the humans to their guest quarters, which were beautiful crystal rooms with views of the floating gardens. Arya watched Commander Drake thank the queen multiple times, bowing like a servant instead of standing proud like a leader should. That evening, the palace held a feast to honor the human visitors. Arya wore her finest gown, made from fabric that sparkled like captured starlight. Her hair was braided with tiny diamonds that caught the light perfectly. She looked exactly like what she was, a princess of the most advanced magical race in the world. The humans, meanwhile, looked exactly like what they were, simple. People trying their best in a world far beyond their understanding. Commander Drake had cleaned up for dinner, but his best formal clothes still looked plain compared to the flowing robes of her people. He sat at the high table with Queen Lyra, trying to make conversation about trade routes and military cooperation. Passed the wine to our distinguished guests, Arya said loudly enough for nearby nobles to hear. She emphasized the word distinguished in a way that made it sound like a joke. Several young lords and ladies giggled. They understood her meaning perfectly. As the evening progressed, Arya found more opportunities to show her superiority. When Commander Drake asked about their crystal technology, she interrupted with a sweet smile. "Oh, it's probably too complicated to explain," she said. "We've been developing these techniques for thousands of years. It might be hard for someone from a shorter-lived species to understand." Commander Drake looked at her for a long moment, then simply nodded. "I'm sure you're right, Princess. Perhaps you could recommend some basic reading materials for us. Double quotes. His calm response only annoyed Arya more. She had expected him to get angry or defensive, which would have proven her point about human emotional instability. Instead, he remained polite and respectful, which somehow made her feel worse. Queen Lyra shot her daughter a warning look, but Arya pretended not to notice. She was having too much fun showing these humans their proper place. "Tell me, Commander," she continued, "how do your people manage to accomplish anything important when you have so little time to learn? 80 years seems hardly enough to master even basic skills." This time, Commander Drake's expression grew. "Thoughtful. You're right that we have less time than your people, Princess. But sometimes having limited time makes us work harder to achieve our goals. We can't afford to waste opportunities." "How inspiring," Arya replied with false sweetness. "Though I suppose when you're desperate, any small achievement must feel important." The other humans at the table shifted uncomfortably. Queen Lyra's eyes flashed with anger, but she maintained her royal composure. Commander Drake simply smiled. "Desperation can indeed motivate great things, Princess. Some of humanity's greatest achievements have come from people who refuse to give up, despite overwhelming odds." His quiet dignity in the face of her rudeness only made Arya more determined to crack his polite exterior. She spent the rest of the evening making subtle insults disguised as innocent questions. She asked about human lifespans, their lack of magic, their simple technology, and their crude military tactics. Through it all, Commander Drake answered her questions with patience and respect. He never lost his temper, never responded with insults of his own, and never showed anything but genuine interest in learning about her people's culture. By the time the feast ended, Arya felt more frustrated than victorious. She had expected to embarrass this human commander, to show everyone how inferior his kind was compared to her people. Instead, his gracious behavior had made her look petty and small. As the guests retired to their rooms, Queen Lyra approached her daughter with a face like thunder. "We need to talk," she said quietly. Now, Arya lifted her chin defiantly. She was a princess, after all. She had done nothing wrong by showing these humans their proper place in the world. If anything, she had been too kind to them. But as she followed her mother toward the private royal chambers, she noticed Commander Drake in the garden below, walking alone under the starlight. Something about his solitary figure made her feel strange, not superior, but something else. She couldn't quite name. She pushed the feeling away. Tomorrow, she would continue showing these humans exactly what she thought of their kind. After all, someone had to maintain proper standards around here. The next morning brought new opportunities for Princess Arya to show her disdain for the human visitors. She woke up feeling proud of how she had handled the previous evening's feast in her mind. She had successfully demonstrated the natural superiority of her people over these simple humans. But Queen Lyra's angry words from the night before still echoed in her head. Her mother had lectured her about respect and diplomacy, but Arya felt justified in her behavior. Someone had to maintain proper standards, and if her mother was too polite to do it, then she would. The humans were scheduled to begin serious trade negotiations that morning. Arya decided to observe the meetings, telling herself it was her royal duty to learn about diplomacy. Really, she just wanted more chances to show these visitors their place. She arrived at the council chambers early, choosing a seat where she could watch everything. The room was magnificent, with crystal walls that sparkled in the morning light and floating chairs that adjusted themselves to each person's comfort. Everything about it screamed advanced civilization. Commander Drake entered with his delegation, carrying thick folders of documents. Arya noticed he had dark circles under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept well. Good, she thought. Maybe he was finally realizing how out of his depth he was in her world. "Good morning, Princess," he said politely when he saw her. "I hope you don't mind if we begin our discussions. We have much to cover." "Of course not," Arya replied with false sweetness. "I'm eager to learn how humans conduct business. I'm sure it will be educational." Queen Lyra arrived with her advisors, and the formal negotiations began. Commander Drake spread maps across the crystal table, showing trade routes between their kingdoms. His fingers traced paths through mountains and across seas as he explained the benefits of increased commerce. "These routes have been used safely for decades," he said. "Our merchants know them well, and we can guarantee protection for your traders." Lord Vance, the Queen's chief advisor, studied the maps carefully. The distances seemed considerable. "Are you certain your people can maintain security across such vast areas?" "We have established checkpoints every 50 miles, Commander Drake replied. "Each one is staffed with experienced guards who know the local conditions." Arya couldn't help herself. 50 miles, she said with a laugh. "That seems like a very long distance for humans to travel safely. Don't your people get tired walking so far?" The human delegation exchanged glances. One of Commander Drake's advisors, a younger man named Captain Reed, looked annoyed. But Drake himself remained calm. "We actually use horses for long distances, Princess," he said patiently. "They're quite efficient for transportation." "Oh, how clever," Arya said, clapping her hands together mockingly. "You've learned to ride animals." "How very resourceful." Queen Lyra's eyes flashed with warning. But Arya ignored her mother's disapproval. She was just getting started. The negotiations continued with discussions about different goods to trade. The humans offered metals, grains, and crafted weapons. In return, they wanted access to the magical crystals that powered much of the ethereal kingdom's technology. "These crystals," Commander Drake said, "could help us improve our farming methods. We could grow more food and feed more people." "Fascinating," Arya interrupted. "You want our advanced magical technology to help with basic farming. Tell me, Commander, have your people not figured out how to grow food properly on their own?" This time, Captain Reed did speak up. "Princess, we've been farming successfully for thousands of years. We're simply looking for ways to improve our methods." "Oh, I'm sure you have," Arya said with a patronizing smile. "Though I suppose when you only live 80 years, you don't have much time to really master anything complex." The tension in the room was becoming obvious. Queen Lyra tried to redirect the conversation back to business, but Arya had found her rhythm. During the lunch break, she decided to have some real fun with the human visitors. She volunteered to show them around the palace, claiming it was her pleasure to educate them about ethereal culture. "This way, please," she said, leading them through corridors lined with floating artwork. "Try to keep up. I know the magical lifts can be confusing for those who aren't used to them." As they walked, Arya made sure to point out everything the humans couldn't do. "See how these paintings change as we pass? They respond to our magical presence, of course. They probably just look like regular pictures to you." Commander Drake studied the shifting artwork with genuine interest. "Remarkable technology. How? Do you program them to respond to different people?" "Program?" Arya laughed. "Oh, Commander, you're thinking like a human again. This isn't technology, it's magic. Something you're born with, not something you learn." "I see," he said thoughtfully. So it's an inherited ability? Exactly. Though I suppose that's hard to understand when your people can't do anything magical at all. They passed through the royal gardens, where flowers bloomed in impossible colors and trees grew fruit that sparkled like jewels. Arya made sure to touch several plants, causing them to glow brighter just to show off. Amazing, Captain Reed whispered to another human. I've never seen anything like this. Of course you haven't, Arya said, pretending she hadn't been eavesdropping. These gardens have been cultivated for over 1,000 years. Each plant is carefully chosen and magically enhanced. It takes centuries to develop this kind of beauty. Your people must be very patient, Commander Drake observed. We have to be, Arya replied. When you live as long as we do, you learn to think in terms of centuries, not years. I suppose that's another concept that's difficult for humans to grasp. The afternoon brought more formal negotiations, but Arya's behavior had clearly affected the mood. The human delegates seemed less enthusiastic, and several times she caught them whispering among themselves. During a discussion about military cooperation, she decided to push even further. Forgive me, she said, interrupting a complex explanation about defensive strategies. But I'm curious about human military tactics. When you have such short lifespans, how do you train soldiers properly? It seems like by the time they learn to fight well, they're already too old to be effective. Commander Drake set down his pen and looked at her directly. Princess, may I ask you something? Of course. How old are you? The question caught her off guard. I'm 17. 17. He repeated. And how much actual experience do you have with military matters, or trade negotiations, or governing people? Arya felt her cheeks burn. I am a princess. I was born to understand these things. I see, Commander Drake said quietly. I was born a farmer's son. I've spent 30 years learning to be a soldier and a diplomat. I've made mistakes, learned from them, and tried to do better. But perhaps you're right. Maybe being born to something is more valuable than earning it through experience. The room fell silent. Even Queen Lyra seemed surprised by the commander's gentle but pointed response. Arya realized she had been challenged in a way she'd never experienced before. No one had ever questioned her right to speak on important matters simply because she was royal. The idea that experience might matter more than bloodline was foreign and disturbing. I simply meant, she stammered, then stopped. She didn't actually know what she meant. Of course, Princess, Commander Drake said politely. I'm sure you meant no offense. But his calm response somehow made her feel worse than if he had gotten angry. She had expected him to lose his temper, to prove that humans were emotional and unstable. Instead, he had made her look foolish with just a few quiet questions. The rest of the day's negotiations proceeded in an uncomfortable atmosphere. Arya found herself unable to make her usual cutting remarks. Every time she thought of something clever to say, she remembered Commander Drake's words about earning things through experience. By evening, she was frustrated and confused. Her easy superiority had been shaken, and she didn't like the feeling. She had always known exactly who she was and where she fit in the world. Now, for the first time, she was beginning to doubt herself. That night, as she prepared for bed, she saw Commander Drake in the gardens again. He was walking alone, looking up at the stars. Something about his solitary figure made her feel strange. Not superior this time, but almost guilty. She pushed the feeling away. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow. She would show these humans exactly what she thought of their kind, and she would do it properly this time. But deep down, she wasn't sure she believed that anymore. Princess Arya had never seen her mother this angry before. Queen Lyra stood by the tall crystal windows of her private chambers, her usually calm face twisted with disappointment and rage. The soft moonlight that filtered through the walls made everything look cold and harsh. Sit down, Arya, the queen commanded, her voice carrying a tone that made Arya's stomach clench with fear. We need to have a very serious conversation. Arya settled into one of the floating chairs, trying to maintain her defiant attitude. But something about her mother's expression made her feel smaller than she had in years. Still, She refused to back down. Mother, if this is about the humans, I was simply defending our people's honor, she began. Someone has to show them their proper place in the world. Their proper place. Queen Lyra's voice rose dangerously. And what exactly do you think their proper place is, Arya? Below us, obviously, Arya replied, though her voice wasn't as confident as before. We live longer. We have magic. We're more advanced in every way. It's just natural that we would be superior to them. Queen Lyra closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them again, Arya saw something she had never seen before. Deep, painful sadness mixed with barely controlled fury. You know nothing about the natural order of things, her mother said quietly. You know nothing about humans. And you know nothing about yourself. I know enough, Arya shot back. I know that Commander Drake and his people are beneath us. I know that they come here begging for our help because they can't manage their own affairs. I know that you know nothing. Queen Lyra's voice cracked like thunder. You have spent days insulting and humiliating a man who deserves more respect than anyone in this kingdom. You have shamed yourself. You have shamed me. And you have shamed our entire bloodline with your cruel behavior. Arya felt tears threatening to spill from her eyes. Her mother had never spoken to her like this before. I don't understand why you're defending them. They're just humans. Just humans. Queen Lyra repeated slowly. Just humans. Do you hear yourself, Arya? Do you understand what you're saying? I'm saying the truth, Arya replied, though her voice was getting smaller. Everyone knows humans are inferior to our kind. Everyone knows they're less intelligent, less capable, less important. Why are you pretending otherwise? Queen Lyra walked to her daughter and knelt down so they were eye to eye. Because, my dear daughter, you are about to learn something that will change everything you think you know about yourself and about the world. Something in her mother's tone made Arya's heart start beating faster. What do you mean? I mean that your cruelty toward Commander Drake isn't just wrong. It's the worst kind of betrayal imaginable. Queen Lyra's voice was shaking now, and before I tell you why, I need you to understand something about our family history. Arya sat very still, suddenly afraid of what she was about to hear. 18 years ago, Queen Lyra began, our kingdom was fighting for its very survival. Dark forces from the Shadow Realm had declared war on all the free peoples of the world. They wanted to destroy everything good and beautiful, to turn the entire world into a place of darkness and despair. I remember the stories, Arya said quietly. You always said it was the worst war in our history. It was, and we were losing. Queen Lyra's eyes grew distant as she remembered. Our magic was powerful, but it wasn't enough. The Shadow armies seemed endless, and they had weapons that could drain our life force. We needed allies, and we needed them desperately. So you made alliances with other magical kingdoms. We tried, but most of the other magical peoples were already fighting their own battles. The only ones who could help us were the humans. Queen Lyra stood and walked back to the window. I was sent as an ambassador to the human capital to beg for their aid. Arya frowned. You? But you were just a princess then. Why would they send you on such an important mission? Because I was young enough to make the dangerous journey and royal enough to speak with authority. It was a terrible risk, but we had no choice. Queen Lyra's voice became softer. I expected to find exactly what you see when you look at humans. Simple, primitive people who could barely help themselves, let alone us. But you didn't know. I didn't. Instead, I found people who were willing to risk everything to help strangers. I found warriors who fought not for glory or conquest, but to protect innocent lives. I found leaders who made impossible decisions with wisdom and courage. Queen Lyra turned back to face her daughter, and I found one man who changed everything. I thought I knew about the world. Arya's stomach was churning now. She had a terrible feeling she knew where the story was going. His name was Drake. Queen Lyra continued. He was a young commander then, about your age. He had already proven himself in battle, but he was still humble and kind. When I first met him, I thought he was just another human soldier. I was wrong, Mother. Please stop, Arya whispered. I can't stop, Arya, you need to hear this. Queen Lyra's voice was gentle now, but firm. Drake was assigned to be my guide and protector during the negotiations. At first, I treated him the way you've been treating him, with polite disdain, as if he were somehow beneath me. But he wasn't. He was the bravest, most honorable person I had ever met. When shadow assassins tried to kill me, he put himself between us without hesitation. When I was injured in battle, he carried me to safety. When I was lost and frightened, he gave me hope. Arya felt like she was going to be sick. Mother, you're scaring me. I'm scaring myself, Queen Lyra admitted, because I have to tell you something that I've kept secret for 18 years. Something that's going to change everything you think you know about yourself. What secret? Queen Lyra knelt down again, taking her daughter's hands in hers. Drake. And I fell in love, Arya, deeply, completely, impossibly in love. Despite all the reasons why it was wrong, despite all the obstacles in our way, despite the fact that our peoples were so different, we couldn't help ourselves. Arya's eyes widened. In horror, no, that's not possible. It is possible, and it happened. We tried to fight it, tried to pretend it was just friendship, but love doesn't listen to reason. By the time the war ended, we both knew that we would never feel the same way about anyone else. But you married father, Arya said desperately. You married King Aldrich and had me. Queen Lyra's eyes filled with tears. I never married King Aldrich, Arya. I told everyone I did because I had to protect you. But it wasn't true. What do you mean? I mean that before Drake and I were forced apart by duty and politics, something wonderful happened. I discovered I was going to have a baby who would carry the blood of both our peoples, a baby who would be living. Proof that love can exist between any two people, regardless of their differences. Arya's world was starting to spin. You're saying? I'm saying that Drake is not just the commander you've been insulting for 2 days. He's not just a human visitor to our kingdom. He's not just a man trying to negotiate trade agreements. Queen Lyra's voice broke completely. He's your father, Arya. Commander Drake is your father. The words hit Arya like a physical blow. She staggered backward, her mind reeling as everything she had believed about herself crumbled into dust. That's impossible, she whispered. I'm pure-blooded ethereal. I have magic. I look like our people. You have magic because I'm your mother. You look like our people because my blood is strong in you. But you also have your father's courage, his stubbornness, and his kind heart, though you've been hiding it behind cruelty and pride. Arya felt like she was drowning. He knows. He knows I'm his daughter. He has always known. When I sent word that he would be leading the human delegation, I hoped that somehow, someway, you would see past your prejudices and recognize the man who gave me the greatest gift of my life. You. But I've been horrible to him, Arya said, her voice barely a whisper. I've insulted him, mocked him, treated him like he was nothing. Yes, you have. And he has endured every cruel word because he loves you more than his own life. He has watched his daughter treat him with contempt, and he has never said a word in his own defense. Because he respects the choice we made to protect you. Arya collapsed into her chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she had done. The man she had spent 2 days humiliating was her own father. Every insult she had thrown at him, every mocking laugh, every dismissive gesture had been directed at the person who had given her life. I'm a monster, she said, tears streaming down her face. I'm a terrible, cruel monster. You're young. Woman who was raised to believe in her own superiority, Queen Lyra said gently. You're someone who has never been challenged to think beyond her own limited experience. But now you have a choice, Arya. You can continue to be the person you've been, or you can choose to become someone better. Through the window, they could see Commander Drake walking alone in the gardens, his shoulders bent with the weight of 18 years of secret fatherhood, and 2 days of enduring his own daughter's hatred. What have I done? Arya whispered, watching the man who was her father walk alone in the moonlight. What have I done? Arya didn't sleep that night. She couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Commander Drake's face, patient, kind. and unknowingly enduring insult after insult from his own daughter. The room that had always felt like a safe haven now seemed like a prison, and her reflection in the crystal mirror looked like a stranger. She spent hours studying her face, searching for traces of the man she had been so cruel to. Now that she knew the truth, she could see him everywhere. The determined set of her jaw when she was angry, that was his. The way she held her shoulders when she felt defensive. She had seen him do the exact same thing. Even the stubborn piece of hair that never stayed in place reminded her of how his own hair fell across his forehead. How had she never noticed before? How had she been so blind? The worst part wasn't just that she had been cruel to a stranger. The worst part was that somewhere deep inside, she had felt drawn to dismiss him so harshly precisely. Because something about him had seemed familiar, some part of her had recognized him. And instead of embracing that recognition, she had fought against it with extra cruelty. As dawn broke over the Crystal City, Arya finally gave up trying to sleep. She wrapped herself in a silk robe and stepped onto her balcony, hoping the fresh air might clear her head. But instead of peace, she found more torment. Below in the gardens, Commander Drake was already awake, practicing sword forms in the early morning light. His movements were precise and graceful. Speaking of decades of training and discipline, he moved like someone who had learned to fight not for sport or glory, but because lives depended on his skill. This was her father. This man who had spent his life protecting others, who had loved her mother enough to let her go when duty demanded it, who had endured to days of insults from his own child. Without saying a word in his own defense, Arya watched him complete his practice routine, then sit on a garden bench to clean his sword, even from a distance. She could see the careful way he handled his weapon, the respect he showed for the tool that had kept him alive through countless battles. Everything about him spoke of honor, discipline, and quiet strength. She thought about all the things she had said to him, all the comments about human weakness, about their short lifespans making them desperate and inferior. She had mocked his scars, his practical clothing, his rough hands. She had questioned his intelligence, his capability, his worth as a person, and he had taken it all without complaint because he loved her. The guilt hit her like a physical weight, making it hard to breathe. She had to grip the balcony railing to keep herself upright as the full impact of her cruelty finally sank in. Her mother had said that Drake had endured every cruel word because he loved her more than his own life. What kind of person could love someone who treated them so badly? What kind of parent could watch their child hurt them over and over again and never fight back? The answer was simple: the kind of person she had never been taught to recognize or value. Someone who put love before pride, duty before comfort, and other people's well-being before their own feelings. Everything she had been raised to believe was being turned upside down. She had grown up thinking that nobility came from bloodline, that worth came from magical ability, that superiority came from living longer than other races. But here was a man with no magic, a relatively short lifespan, and common birth who possessed more true nobility than anyone she had ever known. A soft knock at her door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Come in," she called weakly. Lady Celeste entered, her face bright with gossip. "Arya, you look terrible. Didn't you sleep? Anyway, I have the most interesting news about our human visitors." "I don't want to hear it," Arya said quietly. "But this is really good," Celeste insisted. "I heard from the kitchen staff that Commander Drake asked for the simplest possible meals. Apparently, he doesn't want to waste good food on himself. Can you imagine being so poor that you're afraid of eating decent food?" Each word felt like a knife in Arya's heart. "Celeste, please stop." And Captain Reed told one of the guards that they're not even staying in proper hotels when they travel. They camp outside most of the time to save money for their kingdom. It's so pathetic. "Stop," Arya said more firmly. "Oh, and the best part, I heard that Commander Drake sends most of his salary back to some village to help build a school." "School? As if teaching human children will actually accomplish anything important." I said stop, Arya shouted, turning to face her friend with tears streaming down her face. "Just stop talking. Celeste stepped back, startled by the outburst. Arya, what's wrong with you? Why are you defending them? Because, Arya said, her voice breaking, I just learned that everything I thought I knew about the world is wrong. Everything I thought about humans is wrong. Everything I thought about myself is wrong. I don't understand. That man you're making fun of, Commander Drake, he's not some pathetic human begging for our help. He's a hero who saved our entire kingdom 18 years ago. He's someone who sacrifices his own comfort to help others. He's someone who has more honor in his little finger than I have in my entire body. Celeste looked confused and a little frightened. Arya, you're scaring me. What's happened to you? I learned the truth, Arya said simply. And the truth is that I'm a terrible person who has spent days being cruel to someone who deserved nothing but respect and love. She turned back to the balcony, where Commander Drake was now walking toward the palace for the morning meal. Soon, she would have to face him again. Soon, she would have to sit in the same room with the man she had spent days humiliating, knowing that he was her father and that he knew exactly who she was. How could she look him in the eyes? How could she sit through another meal, another meeting, another moment of pretending that nothing had changed when everything had changed? I have to go, she told Celeste, who was still standing in the doorway looking confused. Where are you going? To try to figure out how to live with what I've done. Arya left her chambers and wandered the crystal corridors of the palace, seeing everything with new eyes, the beautiful artwork, the floating stairs, the magical lights that responded to her presence. None of it seemed impressive anymore. It all seemed empty, meaningless, like pretty decorations hiding an ugly truth about who she really was. She passed other young nobles preparing for the day, laughing and gossiping about trivial things. Had she really been like them just yesterday? Had she really thought that being born with magic made her better than people who had to earn their place in the world through hard work and sacrifice? The breakfast hall was already busy when she arrived. Queen Lyra sat at the high table with Commander Drake and his delegation, discussing the day's agenda. Arya could see her mother's careful politeness, but she could also see the strain in her eyes. This had to be incredibly difficult for her too, watching the man she had once loved being treated badly by their daughter. Commander Drake looked up as Arya entered, and their eyes met across the room. For a moment, she saw something flicker in his expression, hope, maybe, or concern. The look of a father trying to understand his child. She couldn't bear it. She turned and fled from the hall, running through the palace corridors until she found herself in the highest tower, gasping for breath and fighting back tears. Below her, the crystal city sparkled in the morning sun, beautiful and peaceful. But inside her heart, everything was chaos and pain. She had discovered that her father was a hero, and she had treated him like an enemy. She had learned that true nobility had nothing to do with bloodlines, and everything to do with character. She had realized that she was not the superior being. She had always believed herself to be she was just a foolish, cruel child who had hurt the one person who should have been able to count on her love, and she had no idea how to make it right. 3 days had passed since the world-shattering revelation, and Arya still couldn't find the courage to face her father properly. She had attended meals and meetings, but always sat as far away as possible, never speaking unless directly asked a question. The guilt was eating her alive from the inside, but fear kept her paralyzed. Commander Drake had tried several times to catch her eye, to offer her a reassuring smile or a gentle nod. Each attempt only made her feel worse. How could he be so kind to her after everything she had done? How could he look at her with anything other than disappointment and hurt? On the 4th morning, Arya woke up knowing she couldn't continue this way. She had to do something, say something, or the guilt would destroy her completely. But what could she possibly say that would make up for the terrible things she had done? She dressed simply, avoiding her usual elaborate gowns and jewelry. Something about wearing royal finery while trying to apologize seemed wrong. Instead, she chose a plain blue dress that made her look younger, more vulnerable. Arya found Commander Drake in the armory, carefully cleaning his sword as the morning sun streamed through the tall windows. He looked up when she entered, and she saw surprise flicker across his face. "Princess," he said, setting down his weapon and standing respectfully. "Good morning. Please don't call me that," she said quietly. "Not right now." He studied her face, taking in her red-rimmed eyes and the way she held herself like someone carrying a heavy burden. "What would you like me to call you?" Just Arya. Please." "All right, Arya. Would you like to sit down? You look tired." The simple kindness in his voice almost broke her resolve. How could he be so gentle with her? "I know," she whispered. "I know who you are. Mother told me everything." Commander Drake went very still for a long moment. The only sound in the room was the distant noise of the palace waking up for another day. "I see," he said finally. "How are you feeling about that?" "How am I feeling?" Arya's voice cracked. "I feel like the worst person who ever lived. I feel like I should disappear forever and never show my face again. I feel like I've done something so terrible that there's no way to fix it." "Arya, no, please let me finish," she said, tears starting to flow down her cheeks. "I have to say this, or I'll never be able to live with myself. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything I said. To you, everything I did. I was cruel and horrible and completely wrong about everything." Commander Drake took a careful step toward her. "You were young. You didn't know." "That's not an excuse," Arya said firmly. "Being young doesn't give someone the right to be cruel. Not knowing the truth doesn't make it okay to treat people badly. I was wrong, and I hurt you, and I'm sorry." "Thank you," he said quietly. "That means more to me than you know." "Does it really?" "Because I keep thinking about all the things I said. And I don't understand how you can even stand to look at me. I called you common. I said humans were inferior. I mocked your scars and your age and everything about you. How can you forgive me for that?" Commander Drake was quiet for a long moment, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Can I tell you something about forgiveness, Arya?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. 18 years ago, when your mother and I had to say goodbye, I made her a promise. I promised that no matter what happened, no matter how our lives turned out, I would love our child unconditionally. That meant loving you even if you never knew who I was. It meant loving you even if you grew up thinking I was your enemy. But I was so cruel to you. Yes, you were, and it hurt more than I can tell you. But you know what hurt even more? Watching you become someone who could be that cruel. Seeing that despite all your advantages, all your education, all the love your mother gave you, you had grown up to be someone who looked down on others." Arya flinched as if he had slapped her. "You're right. I'm exactly the kind of person you must hate." "I don't hate you, Arya. I could never hate you. But I was disappointed, and I was worried about the kind of woman you were becoming." He paused, studying her face. "But looking at you now, seeing how much this has affected you, I think maybe there's hope." "Hope for what?" "Hope that you can learn from this. Hope that you can become someone better. Hope that my daughter might grow up to be someone I can be truly proud of." The word daughter hit Arya like a physical blow. She had been so focused on her guilt and shame that she hadn't really thought about what it meant to have a father, to have this man as her father. "I want to know you," she said suddenly. "I want to understand where I come from. I want to learn about your people, your life. Everything I've been too proud and stupid to care about." Commander Drake's face lit up with the first genuine smile she had seen from him since his arrival. "I will like that very much, but I don't know how to start. I don't know anything about being a daughter. I don't know anything about humans. I don't even know anything about myself anymore." "That's okay," he said gently. "We have time. We can start small." "What do you mean?" "Well, for instance, would you like to know why I became a soldier?" Arya nodded eagerly. "I grew up in a small farming village that was constantly being raided by bandits when I was about your age. They attacked during harvest time and burned half our crops. People were going to starve that winter." He sat down on a bench and gestured for her to join him. "I decided that night that I was going to learn to fight, so I could protect people who couldn't protect themselves. You became a soldier to help others." "That's right. I wanted to be someone who could stand between innocent people and the things that would hurt them." Arya thought about this. Mother said you protected her during the war. I tried to. She was brave enough to risk her life for her people, and I wanted to make sure she made it home safely. His eyes grew distant, of course. I didn't expect to fall in love with her. What was she like then? Much like you, actually. Proud, intelligent, convinced of her own superiority. He smiled. But she was also brave and kind. And when she saw that she was wrong about something, she wasn't too proud to admit it. Is that what I'm doing now? Admitting I was wrong. Yes, and it takes real courage to do that. More courage than fighting in battle. Sometimes they talked for hours. Commander Drake told her about his childhood, his training, his experiences in the war. He spoke about the friends he had lost, the mistakes he had made, the lessons he had learned. He talked about the village school he helped fund, the young soldiers he trained, the peaceful life he hoped to build when his fighting days were over. In return, Arya found herself talking about things she had never shared with anyone. Her fears about being good enough as a princess, her loneliness despite being surrounded by people, her confusion about her place in the world. I always felt different, she admitted. I never knew why. I thought it was because I was royal. But maybe it was because I'm half human. Maybe, Commander Drake agreed. Or maybe it was because you have a good heart that was being smothered by pride and prejudice. Now that those things are gone, maybe you can figure out who you really are. As the day progressed, other people began to notice the change in Arya. At lunch, she asked Captain Reed about human farming techniques during the afternoon negotiations. She listened carefully and asked thoughtful questions instead of making cutting remarks. When Lady Celeste tried to gossip about the human visitors, Arya quietly told her that such talk was beneath them both. Queen Lyra watched these changes with growing hope and relief. That evening, she found Arya and Commander Drake walking together in the gardens, talking quietly as the stars came out. "Thank you," she said to her daughter later that night. "Thank you for finding the courage to be better than you were." "I'm not better yet," Arya replied. "But I want to be. I want to be someone Dad can be proud of." It was the first time she had called him Dad, and the word felt strange but right on her tongue. "He already is proud of you," Queen Lyra said softly, "and so am I." The negotiations concluded successfully a few days later, with agreements that would benefit both kingdoms greatly. But for Arya, the real success was the relationship she was building with her father and the person she was discovering herself to be. As the human delegation prepared to leave, Arya made a request that surprised everyone. "I want to come with you," she told Commander Drake. "Not permanently, but for a while. I want to see your world, learn about your people, understand the other half of who I am." "Are you sure?" he asked. "It will be very different from what you're used to." "I'm sure," she said firmly. "I've lived 17 years knowing only one side of myself. It's time I learned about the other side." Queen Lyra gave her blessing, and within a week, Arya found herself aboard a human ship, watching the crystal spires of her home fade into the distance. She was nervous and excited and terrified all at once. "What if your people don't accept me?" she asked Commander Drake as they stood at the ship's rail. "They will," he said confidently, "because they'll see what I see. A young woman who has the courage to admit when she's wrong, and the strength to change for the better. And what if I don't live up to their expectations? Then you'll learn from your mistakes and try again. That's what humans do. We keep trying to be better than we were yesterday."